Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. Praise be to God. It is great to be on with you today. We're going to have Father Chris Alar on the team today. We're going to be talking about answering blasphemy. Of course, we're continuing our conversations around the debacle, the debauched presentation at the Olympic ceremony where you got that, hey, if you guys are offended, then I guess whatever, we're sorry, apology out of the Olympic Committee. And I'm still kind of a little miffed that they blocked my video. They had YouTube come and beat me up with a bat the other day. Praise be to God that, you know what, we persevere. We still have great conversations here. And today, Father Chris Alar is going to be on the team to talk about answering the sin of blasphemy. Why is it such a big deal? Why should we not sit around and just take it on the chin, right? What should we do about that? Father Chris Alar is going to give us his response at 30 past the hour. I do have Brent Haynes on the team today, Catholic attorney and freedom fighter. We're going to be talking about the U.S. Secret Service and the FBI testifying before the Senate the other day. I mean, just if you see the picture of the two gentlemen swearing in, raising their right hand, man, the Secret Service guy, like his face is so tense. His jawline just must be like aching out of tension right now because, man, he looked like he was ready for war. And he did get into a couple of tit for tats with Hawley and Cruz and a few, but we're going to be talking about some of the fallout from that. Did the FBI perjure themselves when they seemed to suggest that the postings of the shooter were Republican conservative? But in fact, Gab is saying, nope, sorry, they seem more liberal than anything. So we'll be talking about that, plus the fact that the U.S. Secret Service acting director, Mr. Rowe, doesn't seem to have any additional answers as to how it happened 17 days on. And he denies the reports out of Real Clear Politics that he denied resources to the Trump team. So we're going to be talking about that with Brent Haynes at 14 past the hour. Lots of stories in the news that we're going to be sharing with you the show notes for at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We have a lot to get to today. I'd be grateful if you'd share us with a friend. Let's pray. Let's begin. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
The Holy Maccabees, pray for us. About 170 years before the birth of the Savior, Judea was subjugated by the pagan Seleucid Empire under King Antiochus, who violently attempted to suppress the religion of the Israelites. Among those arrested for resisting were 7 brothers and their mother, remembered as the Holy Maccabees. The pagans attempted to force the family to eat pork, whipping and scourging them, but the faithful Jews refused. When the eldest spoke out in defiance, he was horribly tortured and finally roasted to death. Each of the brothers in turn suffered similar fates, zealously defying the king, while mother and sons all encouraged each other to remain steadfast. The king urged the mother to tell her youngest son to save his own life, but she simply told him not to leave her and his brothers without his company after death, and the enraged king ordered that the defiant boy suffer even crueler torments than the others. Finally, the fearless mother met her end. The relics of these martyrs rest in the Roman Church of St. Peter in Chains, the patronal feast of which is also celebrated today. The Jews would eventually overthrow their persecutors and cleanse the temple, regaining their independence for a few more decades before the Romans eventually took over the region. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Holy Maccabees, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Just the News is reporting top Hamas leader killed in Iran. Iranian media reported that senior Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and his bodyguard were killed at a Tehran home where they were staying while attending the Iranian president's swearing-in ceremony on Tuesday. Haniyeh, 62 years old, rose to become Hamas's political chief, as was one of Israel's top targets for punishment for the October 7 attack. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the assassination. The assassination occurred within 24 hours of an Israeli attack that killed top Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. CNA is reporting bishop in Nigeria revokes ordination of deacons due to fraud. The bishop of Nigeria's Diocese of Lokoja has withdrawn the ordination certificates of 4 men he ordained as deacons on July the 12th. After the ordinations, it emerged that everything the bishop was presented with, including the existence of the congregation the men supposedly belonged to, as well as the congregation's superior general, were all fraudulent. The bishop explained that the ordination that the men, at the request of the supposed priest, who presented himself as the bishop as the superior general of a religious institute called the Paraclete Missionaries, was all forged. Free Beacon reports Kamala's NatSec advisor probed over ties to Iranian influence network. In a Wednesday letter to Harris, Senator Tom Cotton and Rep. Elise Stefanik asked the presumptive Democrat nominee to provide information about her advisor Phil Gordon's connections to Miss Ariana Tabatabai, a senior Department of Defense official who was reportedly involved in the Iranian government operation to expand Tehran's soft power in the U.S. Tabatabai was ousted last year as an alleged member of an Iranian-run influence network that reported back to Tehran. Gordon's connections to Tabatabai are fueling concerns ahead of the 2024 elections. And those are your headline news. Hey, the gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 through 53. Jesus said to the disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets, and what is bad they throw away. Thus it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Do you understand all these things?" They answered, "Yes." And he replied, "Then every scribe who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who brings from his storeroom both the new and the old." When Jesus finished these parables, he went away from there. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. The Ignatius Catholic Study Bible says the parable of the dragnet envisions the day of judgment, when the righteous are separated from the wicked. Leading up to this event, men and women are gathered into the kingdom from all nations, just as the net pulled through the sea collects various species of fish. The fishermen of the parable are the apostles and missionaries of the church. The angels are elsewhere linked with the coming of Christ in judgment. See 2 Thessalonians 1:7, for example. So, just like I said yesterday, if you ever encounter the argument of the rapture, it's not biblical. I mean, one is taken, one is left. They always reference that, right? Of course they do. But guess who gets taken and who gets left? The good guys are always left. It's the bad guys who are always taken. This is yet another example, because the bad fish are taken and thrown into a fire. They're thrown into a fire for forever. Hell is real. People go there forever. So let's help prevent some of that by evangelizing. Father McKeevely, writing back in the 19th century, says the kingdom of heaven, the gospel doctrine, or probably the church militant here below, is like a net, a dragnet cast into the sea. The church is cast into the troubled world, boisterous and stormy world in which men are daily exposed and shipwrecked. Does that sound like a good thing to you? Should you be really buddy-buddy with the world, or should you oppose the world by preaching the gospel, sharing the good, the true, and the beautiful with the world that is so opposed to that gospel? He goes on, and gathering together all kinds of fishes in the church are found every description of persons, whether bond or free, rich or poor, from every quarter of the globe, saints and sinners. Not that any are saints before entering the church, as the fishes are good before caught in the net. The parable is not in this respect to be urged. It only is meant that in the net, after they have entered it, are found good and bad, saints and sinners. When you come to your judgment, the time for decision-making is over. All of your decisions that you have made will be judged. So make good ones before then, right? Because once you get there, it's too late. When at the end of the world, the fullness of the Gentiles shall have entered. This parable exhibits the capacity and amplitude and Catholicity of the church. As the net, the whole church takes in the entire world. The parable was introduced for the twofold purpose of removing any grounds of surprise at seeing sinners and wicked men in the church. As even the best constituted kingdoms, we find thieves, murderers, and of cautioning us against feeling too secure, because we are members of the church, which includes sinners as well as saints, reprobates as well as the elect. You're right. You're right. We desire to be right next to those greatest sinners like us in the kingdom of heaven forever. So let us repent and make a good confession. Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's so good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have Father Chris Alar on the team, and we're going to get his response to the Olympics, of course. But let me tell you, we need to answer the call. We need to step up and respond to blasphemy in society, because it's happening on our watch. And we're going to get what Father Chris Alar says we should be doing about that coming up at 30 past the hour. Looking forward to that. But there are lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well, especially since new video has emerged looking straight over the shoulder of President Donald Trump on July 13th there in that rally. And you can clearly see Thomas Crooks crawling on that roof. It's as obvious as the day is long, which brings up even more questions about why we don't know much information. Let's listen to Senator Josh Hawley for a second.
That people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly persecuted?
Unfairly, sir. We have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
Is that why 17 days in we don't know exactly why nobody was on that roof? Or why nobody could look out that window and see Thomas Crooks crawling on the roof, even though everybody else could? 17 days in, I mean, how much investigation does one need to do to get an answer to that question? Therein lies the challenge. Joining us right now to talk about this is attorney, Catholic freedom fighter, and friend of the show, Brent Haynes. Good morning to you, Brent. Thanks for being on the team.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everybody.
Some fireworks on Capitol Hill. I mean, it just seems to get worse and worse on this story. What was your take?
Well, this hearing really wasn't substantively or in terms of its atmosphere or the procedure a lot different from other contentious hearings between the majority-controlled committees in the House and the minority Republicans in the Senate with administration officials. Aside from the specific substance of this hearing or this event, Joe, let's step back for a moment and think about who these people are and what they're supposed to be doing. These are the highest elected legislative people in our country, United States senators, and over on the side of on the House, members of the U.S. House of Representatives. And they are calling before them people who work in the executive branch of government, employees of the executive branch, people who are supposed to be public servants. They're calling them to testify under oath and to provide information to them. And how many times have you heard the raised voices? How many times have you heard yelling or near yelling. And look, should either side yell? No, but never, except in extremely rare cases where righteous indignation would be justified. Never should a public servant go on Capitol Hill and under oath start yelling or getting vehement with your elected representative in the House of Representatives or your elected senator in the United States Senate. And it happens time again. And again, it's just another sign of the disintegration or the degradation of the values of a civil society that tries to operate peacefully and responsibly and civilly and govern itself. These people are supposed to be public servants. These executive branch members should show up in Congress, say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and no, ma'am, and answer the questions as best they can under oath. And instead, they show up and they raise their voices, they yell, they argue, they engage in political departments, they dodge the questions, and they stonewall. Now, some people are going to say, well, what's new? That's politics. But, compare these hearings to hearings that happened years ago. And you just see it's just another sign of the decline in the proper functioning of our government. Acting Civil Service Director Rowe appeared generally very competent. He appeared authoritative. He seemed knowledgeable, except when it came to answering the hard questions, Joe. And it's understandable that senators and representatives might start to get heated, but it's Acting Director Rowe's job and the director of every other witness to maintain their calm and to provide truthful answers under oath. And really, what Rowe did was stonewall.
17 days, and several of the senators were asking the same question. When are we going to know? When are we going to know exactly the timeline? They still don't have a precise timeline printed. They still have never. I've never seen. Maybe somebody's got this information and I have not seen it, and I'm kind of watching for it, but I haven't seen it. I've never seen a map that pinpoints the exact location the van was parked that they discovered had explosives in it. I've never seen that. I mean, why not? Why can't the American people know where the van was parked and where he rode his bike from, or why he bought a ladder that morning and then never used it? I mean, there's a lot of information that seems like it wouldn't be a conflict of security or investigation protocols just to be transparent with America, but we're told repeatedly over and over and over again, well, we have to do an investigation. Clearly, the senators were upset because nobody's been fired or held accountable already 17 days into this. And so that was a big, fiery, contentious point between Acting Director Rowe and the senators. However, I want to go to the FBI guy, Paul Abate, I think his name is, the deputy director there at the FBI. He was asked about the social media post. And so far as I know, the only social media post to date that have been discovered for Thomas Matthew Crooks were from Gab. As far as I know, those are the only ones that have been discussed. And the FBI deputy director, he basically said that he was a conservative Republican in his postings. The Gab CEO, he has published these posts publicly now, so they're available to everyone. They tell a different story. They make Thomas Matthew Crooks, if in fact these are his, and I think that still has yet to be proven, but if they are his, well, he definitely supports Biden. He definitely supports open borders. He seems to be okay with COVID lockdowns and all the rest. None of those talking points are conservative ones. Why the spin here?
Well, Joe, again, you raise a good point. The alleged, and let's be careful about this, the alleged social media posts that show that the shooter was a Biden supporter, need to be verified. But the FBI comes out and they release selected posts. And when I heard this and then heard the reports again and see that this is what they're releasing, it strongly suggests that they are releasing selected posts and selected posts that would portray the shooter as a conservative, someone who didn't like immigrants, etc. So now we have a report, and again, it needs to be verified, that there are other posts on this other social media website, and the Secret Service doesn't comment There are allegedly over 700 media posts by some reports, or social media posts by some reports that have been uncovered. They do need to be verified, and we need to be careful and not jump to conclusions. The FBI releases what look like one-sided posts. It already looks like it was found out the same afternoon. People were reporting that there was an Act Blue donation that appeared almost certainly to be from this shooter. Well, if you're a Donald Trump supporter, you don't donate to Act Blue. That is a liberal, leftist, Democrat fundraising site. So why is the FBI releasing the selected post? And again, this comes from the same high-level executive branch law enforcement security organizations that came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop, was a fraud and was actually a Soviet disinformation effort. And then, the FBI goes into court only a few months ago, 4 years after saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was a fraud. They go into court and they testify under oath that the Hunter Biden laptop was genuinely, authentically Hunter Biden's. This is the same FBI that's tried to infiltrate traditional Catholic parishes. It's the same FBI that went out at dawn with their SWAT team to raid Mark Houck's home and arrest him when a local George Soros reported prosecutor wouldn't even bother prosecuting him, and who was then ultimately vindicated at trial. So people have good reason to wonder whether or not the FBI is releasing selective social media posts to portray the shooter in a particular light. But we have a right to be suspicious and to be careful, but we should be careful about this. We want to wait until we authentically, we confirm the authenticity of all the social media posts. Well, let's go back to your earlier point about why don't we know the outline of events? Why don't we know the nature of the movement? Senator Rick Scott of Florida made an excellent point. He was the governor during the two horrific shootings in Florida, one at the nightclub and one at the high school, where many people were killed. And Senator Scott made the excellent point that when those events happened, those horrible mass shootings happened, he said, he insisted, he made it clear, he said, we have to have daily press conferences. We have to keep the people informed. And you see that with almost every other event in the country when there is something horrible that happens. Not just mass shootings, but any kind of horrible event, whether it's criminal or not. So why hasn't the Secret Service held press releases and explained what they know? Why haven't they? Because they can't answer the hard questions, Joe. When Senator Cruz and when Senator Hawley pressed Acting Director Rowe, he stonewalled. When asked about denying the support or additional security for the Trump campaign, it sounded like the questioning wasn't precise. It sounded like, if you listen carefully, it sounded like that Rowe was trying to say, he kept saying we didn't deny coverage for the Butler event, So it sounded like he was trying to describe the process. And unfortunately, he was interrupted. They should have let him go ahead and continue to make his point. It should have said, okay, tell us what the process is. But he was still stonewalling. He was trying to sort of subtly get around the issue, because it sure looks like that it's been reported by the Washington Post that the Secret Service has denied additional security requests from the Trump campaign in the past. And then Rowe is trying to say, well, we didn't do it this time. Well, maybe they didn't ask for additional security this time because it's been denied so many times in the past. But ultimately, when pressed on who was responsible for security at the event, who made the decisions to leave the roof uncovered, who made the decision for this, who made the decision for that, ultimately, who was responsible for all of this? And Senator Hawley says he knows the name of it. Acting Director Rowe would not admit it, and he used the word conversation about request for security. He said, when there's a request for additional security, there's a conversation. All right, there might be a back and forth about how much security a given campaign request, and what type of security, the extent of security of a particular event. But ultimately, the Secret Service makes a decision. And ultimately, there's one person in the Secret Service, or perhaps a committee, or a group of people in the Secret Service, who decide whether or not to extend additional security when it's requested for a protectee. And the acting Secret Service director refused to admit that. He just wanted to stonewall. He said, well, there's a conversation. No, ultimately, it's up to the Secret Service, and he just refused to say, Joe, it's a short news cycle. They're going to stonewall on this. They know other events will intervene. They don't want to name who is responsible. That's why we're not getting daily press conferences, and that's why we're not getting direct answers. You know, I hate to sound suspicious, but this is consistent with the way this administration has been happening, has been behaving before Congress for the last 3.5 years. And if the right political party wins in November, they're never going to have to really answer these questions. And watch, eventually there will be some sort of report issued later by the Secret Service, and there will be some accountability. Maybe somebody will lose their job, but we're not going to learn a lot.
Well,
we're not going to.
I think we're all asking for somebody to be held accountable. Who knows? I guess we have to wait for the next film. It's like Zapruder footage or something like that. Hey, we'll be right back. More is coming up next with Father Chris Alar.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The Hill reports feds hold rates at the Wall Street, waiting for cuts later this year. The Federal Reserve held interest rates steady at a range of 5.25% to 5.5% amid growing speculation that the central bank would start rate cuts later this year. Stocks rallied ahead of the decision, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average of big U.S. companies up more than 200 points in morning trading. The Fed has maintained rates at their current levels since last August in response to elevated inflation, which has remained above 3% for the last year before finally dipping beneath the 2% range in June. Breitbart reports Harris is sole candidate to qualify for the DNC roll call. Vice President Kamala Harris will be the only candidate on the Democratic National Committee virtual roll call ballot, DNC Chairman Jamie Harrison confirmed in a statement. Convention delegates will begin voting on Harris's nomination on Thursday and finish by August the 5th. The DNC announced that the 3,923 delegates had petitioned to nominate Harris, and despite the early vote to select a nominee, delegates will still convene as planned in late August at the DNC in Chicago. And Catholic Vote is reporting plummeting birth rates are dangerous. A Politico journalist singled out that the dangerous and destabilizing effects of America's failing birth rates, including Social Security insolvency, loss of economic growth, and a smaller and older workforce. The current U.S. average birth rate is far below the replacement rate. The birth rates has steadily declined since the 1960s, with a 3% decrease just since 2022. Yikes. Those are your headline news. Praise be to God. Hey, did you catch Father Chris Alar's powerful? He put out 2 homilies, actually, on the subject of the Olympics. We're going to be linking to both of those homilies in the show notes for you today. But Father Chris Alar joins us right now by phone. He's the Provincial Superior of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of Mercy Province of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception in the U.S. and in Argentina. Father Alar, good morning to you. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning.
Let's talk about the sin of blasphemy. Can you define the term for me? Like, what constitutes blasphemy? Why is it so critically important that Catholics not just sit around and take it on the chin and be quiet about it?
Right. See, the thing that a lot of people don't think or don't realize is the seriousness of it. Basically, we have sin in 2 ways. We sin against God, we sin against neighbor. And St. Thomas Aquinas told us that actually, compared to blasphemy, every other sin is slight. And that's a wake-up call, because it's a sin against God, which is even more serious than a sin against our neighbor, as bad as that is. So basically, it's showing disrespect to God or something sacred, or saying or doing something that shows disrespect against God or the sacred. For instance, saying something bad about God, using the Lord's name in vain, denouncing his church, or, as we saw, acting out in mockery of Scripture and the sacredness of the Last Supper.
Yeah, it was. I did not watch the entire ceremony, thankfully. I didn't want to. I've heard some really bad things, and you described them in your homily, which we're going to be linking to today. It's shocking. It's shocking, to be honest with you, that someone like I've been talking about the Trump July 13 attempted assassination and the Capitol Hill hearings that have gone on as a result of that, and the senators, the congressmen, they all want answers. I similarly want answers. Who at the Olympic Committee would have agreed to, approved this opening ceremony? The Olympic Committee blocked my video the other day on YouTube. So if they can take the time to block my video, I have to believe that they went above and beyond to approve ahead of time, know exactly what would happen before it actually happened. So somebody at the Olympic Committee thought that this was perfectly okay. That should trouble us, in my opinion. What do you say?
And that person is this Thomas Jolly. He is the artistic director that was in charge of the opening ceremony. And he totally, in the first time I mentioned how he totally defended this spectacle. And then the really insulting thing, it was almost like this passive-aggressive insult afterwards, as he says, "I'm not aware of any criticism." And he says, "We're just worried about inclusion, and I'm not aware of any criticism." Wow. And then he says, and then I gave a second homily the next day, which, trust me, I didn't want to do. I wanted to be moving on, but I had to give that second homily because he came out with this ridiculous, I'm calling it a ridiculous excuse, trying to justify that it had nothing, he used the words, nothing to do with the Last Supper. And the point that we made that I emphasized in that second homily is what I'm calling the smoking gun. And that is because the main figure in this spectacle was named Barbara Butch. And by the way, I don't know if you've heard, she's now taking legal action because she's saying she's being harassed online. It's like, well, there are consequences. Never do we condone, if what she's saying is true on what people are saying to her. Absolutely never. That's not Christian. We're defeating our purpose. But you also have to realize there are consequences to what you do. And if you're going to go ahead and do that, what are the consequences if you do a cartoon of Muhammad? Well, you lose your life. You lose your life. You just don't, you got to be prudent. And prudence is something that is a lost virtue. But anyway, this main figure, the centerpiece of that, which they said they did not mock the Last Supper. It was an imitation of a 17th century Dutch painting, but actually it was both. If you're right too, Joe, I didn't watch the whole thing. I thank goodness, but then I went back and watched it, and they do both. They first organize themselves in the exact position of the Last Supper. There's just no way that anybody could state this was not in reference at all to the Last Supper. And then, yes, they went on to that bacchanal, that Greek revelry and party and whatnot, but they did both. But the thing is, she's saying that it had nothing to do with it, or I'm sorry, the Thomas Jolly. But here's the interesting thing. She posted on Instagram the actual Last Supper painting, the actual painting of Da Vinci. Yeah. And her words, and this was in the New York Post, she said, quote, oh yes, the new gay testament. And she showed the picture of the Last Supper. Now, it doesn't take anybody with any brain power to be able to figure out that when they removed that, they are basically now saying it had nothing to do with it. She removed it, but it's too late. So many people saw it. So I guess I got to say, please, insult our intelligence. Come out and say
exactly,
the truth or what our intent was. Listen, we may have done it the wrong way. Our intent was to wake up people. You feel Christianity is oppressive, whatever their argument is, which is false, but whatever it is. But instead, insulting our intelligence and saying it had nothing to do with it, the central figure posted the picture of the Last Supper. So how could you say it has nothing to do with it? That's the issue.
One of the things that I think is just mind-blowing to me is when they brought up the whole Bacchus argument, the whole, the dinner to the Greek gods. Does that make it better, or does that make it worse? The fact that they're trying to point out that this painting, this Dutch painting, was the true target. The Dutch painting predicts worshiping pagan gods, which are demons, and debauchery and orgy. Did we not learn anything from the golden calf? They got up to play in Exodus 32. It was an orgy to a demon under the guise of a bull, and that is why people died that day. It is a horrible thing, and it doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. Don't you think, Father?
Yes, and the thing you just mentioned, what a lot of people don't realize, in all this honor of the Greek god Dionysus and then the Roman version of him, Bacchus, St. Paul told us if we worship a pagan god, it is worship of demons. And so the Roman name of this Greek god Dionysus, he's the god of pleasure. He was the blue guy, right, in the event. And they went on, and you know what? Nobody else is saying, okay, let's, even for the sake of argument, say that this was about this Greek god. Let's even for the sake of argument. What about the headless woman, who they admit was Marie Antoinette, which they keep pointing out she was convicted of treason? That was a sham, first of all. And secondly, they keep pointing out to her insensitivity to the poor to say, let them eat cake. She never said that. She never said that. Let them eat cake. It's absolutely a fabrication throughout history, an urban legend. She never said that. And they kept saying that she was, treason and conspiracy, stealing from the state. And that Thomas Jolly's passive-aggressive statement even says, sound familiar, ? Like he's saying this, the church is doing that. So they're just keep needling. But the whole French Revolution is the state becoming, or I should say we becoming God. Communism is the state becoming God. But in the French Revolution, it's we become God. And that's what the World War I was the fulfillment to end the Christian monarchies. And I said that in that second homily, and boy, did I get slammed online. People calling me vile, that they want to vomit listening to me because we are saying that we shouldn't have ended the Christian monarchy. The greatest history in the world was the Christian monarchies of Europe. People had freedom. People were able to worship. People were able to do the King Louis IX, their own king, is one of the greatest saints who ever walked this earth. And they're tearing statues down of him. I said in that homily yesterday or a couple days ago, I can't even believe we're having this conversation. We've gone so far. And so how we've got here, the answers are many, but why we are here is just, it's baffling.
Well, I got to tell you, it is baffling, and I think that's part of the equation here. There seems to be a diabolical confusion, a diabolical manipulation, and people who should have a common sense filter don't seem to have one. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and they're being oblivious. The denial of objective moral truth, because like I said, they're arguing about this painting. Let's talk about the other things. Okay, first I mentioned there was the singer being the headless Marie Antoinette. A lot of people are not talking about that 10-year-old child that was up there at the time this man is basically showing his genitalia, in color and different things. And I mean, not outwardly maybe removing his pants, but there was absolutely a display of genitalia, and this 10 to 11-year-old child is right there. This is the debauchery. What about the horsemen? They keep saying that wasn't death of the book of Revelation. It was Sequana, the goddess of the Seine River. But that's the symbol of resistance against God, against the church. So even if they want to argue about this painting, what about all your other symbolisms here? The mocking against Christianity, and there's really the worship of the golden calf during those ceremonies. Right. You have the mockery, like not just the horsemen, the Last Supper, but you got genitals, you got the worship of a golden calf. There's a lot here. And then the drag queens are, in meaning, very dangerous.
Yeah. Carnival run amok, perverting the good, the true, and the beautiful seems to be the standard for the day we live in, the times we find ourselves in. But someone once said we were made for times just like these. So therein lies the question. We're at a break with Father Chris Alar, and I want to ask after the break, what do we do about that? How do we properly respond to this? How do we live virtuously, heroically, courageously in a time that wants to give us drag queen, perversion, golden calf, pagan, demon worshiping nonsense? All of that and more with Father Chris Alar coming up right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Share us with a friend.
The Station of the Cross has many ways to keep you informed about our programming. You can view the highlights of our primetime programming schedule or the full 24/7 programming grid at both thestationofthecross.com or the free iCatholic Radio app. Just search under the Programming tab. Our website also offers a printable version for your convenience.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. We're having a conversation with Father Chris Alar from the Marian Shrine there in Massachusetts. I actually don't even know if you're in Massachusetts or not, but nonetheless, we're glad you're on the team today, Father Chris. We're getting your take, your response to this blasphemy that took place at the opening ceremony of the Olympics, the apology of which was just, as Bishop Barron said, it's just not enough. I mean, if you guys felt offended, okay, I guess whatever, we're sorry. That's not the same thing as, wow, we were very wrong about this. Please, please, please forgive us. Please accept our apology. Like these two things aren't the same. Would you say their apology was wanting? And I guess the next question is, what do we do about all of this? How do we respond properly?
Well, you mentioned Bishop Barron. He was the one that first came out and said, it is time for us to actually take action. Now, of course, as I said earlier, we as Catholics never embrace, rioting or burning or some of the things that most other groups that have been offended, if you will, we don't do that. And that's why we're one of the reasons we're an easy target. So we hold to that. We hold to the Christ-like response. But Christ did respond. In fact, Thomas Aquinas stated, again, this is the greatest theologian, philosopher in the history of the church. He stated that if there is a justifiable reason and you don't get angry, you are in sin. You have to get angry. I was shocked by that when I learned that in seminary. And he doesn't mean angry that you're going to go burn something down or hurt somebody or do an act of violence. Of course not. He's talking about the reaction of Christ at the money exchangers. When the temple, when you had to buy the animals of sacrifice in temple currency, and the money exchangers would swindle the people. Christ was justifiably angry. What did he do? Did he just sit in the corner and say, guys, we have to pray? Well, of course we have to pray. But no, he took physical action. And the physical action wasn't violent. He made a statement. But Aquinas says if we see a grave injustice and we're not angry in an ordered way, not sinful anger like the deadly sin. But if we don't, we are in sin. And so the justifiable reason here to be angry should be responded to. And what we announced in that homily was an email and a phone number. And so we invite everybody to contact press office, one word, at Olympic.org. Now, we gave another email out that they changed. They took off. So we now have one that works, and they've actually left it up. It's press office at Olympic.org. Please reach out, make your voice heard. I've been getting thousands of letters. In fact, the homily has over 1 million. It's like 1.2 million views already, and there's like thousands and thousands of comments, and a majority of the people saying, I wrote them, I emailed, I called. So I'm telling you, we are really making a difference. And I even said, if we could get 10,000 people, and out of 1.2 million, let's come up with 10,000 people. we can do that. We can do that. And so it's going to make a huge difference. It absolutely is. And that's what Bishop Barron called us to do. And so we have to fight this. And then there were some mock comments on there saying that we're overreacting. And one person stated about the beauty of the drag queens. And if I may just make one comment here, this is such a wolf in sheep clothing. The culture has given us the drag queen as this lovable, sweet creature, this RuPaul kind of individual that has been around a long time, but is now being shown to be benign, lovable. Actually, they are very dangerous. And that is maybe not for physical violence, but the agenda. This comes from the embracing of the queer theory, which was Michel Foucault. He was this French activist, and it really is an attack on Catholicism. Why? Because they saw this hierarchy of sexual morals, and on the top was heterosexual men and women. Well, as it should be, because that's how God created it. And they see the Catholic Church behind that. And at the bottom, they see the normal heterosexuals at the top of this sexual moray, the sexual moral pyramid. And at the bottom, they see the deviants, the pedophiles, bestiality. And their goal of this queer theory is to elevate this deviancy up to the same level as normal. This is what's called the new normal. Into this new normal by eliminating laws against adult-child sexual activity, animal sexual relations. It's mind-boggling. And what this queer theory has done has picked drag queens to be their evangelists. They are not harmless fun. They are an agenda, and people mocked me. People laughed at me. I'm out there trying to awaken us. Talk about awoke, be awakened. This is the true meaning then of be awakened. This is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And people are bringing their children to libraries, letting them be indoctrinated. This is very dangerous. But nobody is calling out the purpose of this drag queen. The purpose of the drag queen is very dangerous, very, very dangerous, and nobody is saying that, even in the midst of this Olympic controversy. Yeah.
Think about the hypocrisy of this for a second, Father. How many, Hollywood movies have been made, endless amounts of documentary films and articles and books on the subject about the pedophilia and the pederasty of priests, of predator priests within the Catholic Church. Rightly so, mind you, rightly so. And yet the hypocrisy of all of this is somehow these drag queens, somehow this insane sexual perversity is somehow mainstream and okay and acceptable, but they're still going to hold Catholic priests accountable, the Catholic Church accountable for that. Dioceses are bankrupt. Churches and seminaries are being sold at auction to pay off the debt. And yet this is shoved down our throat as something we're supposed to accept. And when we push back, we're the bad guy. Right. That seems utterly bizarre. I go back to diabolical confusion.
It is. And the thing is, what people don't point out, and I did a talk on this on our Explaining the Faith series on Saturday mornings, every Saturday at 11, is the problem in the Catholic Church. Absolutely. Go to the Jenkins study out of Penn State, go to the John Jay report. The problem in the Catholic Church is not pedophilia, it's homosexuality.
Yeah. A
vast majority of those cases were post-puberty. Now, does that make it right? No, of course not. But these were mostly males, adolescents, post-puberty, like 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. Still wrong, still decrepit, still absolutely wrong. But the media won't call it what it is. It's really a phebophobia. It's a homosexual problem. It's not a pedophilia problem. There's almost very little pedophilia, but you can't say that because the media's already twisted it. Here's the real stats, Joe. If you look it up, the real stats are 85% of abuse happens in the home. That's a known fact, again, from the John Jay report, from the Jenkins study. 14% happens in schools and schools and extracurricular. 1% happens in religious institutions. Of that, the Catholic Church is in the bottom half. Still wrong. We still need to fix it, but the perception is totally different. Yeah.
It's hypocrisy 101. No one should stand for it. Anybody with common sense should be opposed to this. Thanks for providing that email. We're going to put a link to that in the show notes today. If you want to contact the Olympic Committee and let them know you're disgust, you can do that. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Father Chris Alar, thank you very much for being on today from the Marian to the Immaculate Conception. Grateful to have you on the team today. God bless you and God love you, Father.
And God bless your work. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go into the after show, get your take, your opinion, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow morning. Timothy Flanders will be on the team from 1 Peter 5. God bless you, and see you then.